Next up, we've got our own Greg Page, Director of Horticulture, who has been in this public horticulture realm for um, 30 or so years. He hadn't quite hit that 58-year gardening mark that Bryce has, but
Close.
he and I are edging our way there pretty quickly. And he's going to expand on kind of where Deanna finished up with the good, the bad, and the ugly, a fast, furious look at insects in the garden. And then when he finishes up, we're going to have a Q&A with all the speakers and our friends at Leaf and Limb. So, Greg, I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Very, very tough shoes to follow. Thanks to Deanna and to Bryce. Um, a lot to cover. That's kind of the theme in a relatively short span of time. My topic's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Very, very fast look at insects in the garden. And unfortunately, I'm going to focus more on the bad in this talk. I did a beneficial insect one not too long ago, and I'll talk about those briefly, but wanted to try to highlight some pests that you're going to encounter if you're a new garden, if you're a new gardener or an old gardener, things that will cross your path for better or worse. So I'm going to go ahead and launch right into it. Um, Thank you for dealing with us as we navigated the snowpocalypse. I hope everybody survived. I grew up in the South, so I like to look at it. It makes for great photography, but I don't like navigating it. And one of the reasons that we leaned in the way that we did is this is what happens when we don't prepare. This was 2014, I believe. So this is what we're afraid of. This is why we kind of postpone things to just doing it from this perspective. And there's a lesson to be learned for this picture that dovetails nicely into my talk. There's a lot of stress going on in this picture. And just like in the plant world, when there are stresses on things, the bad guys will come in and do some damage in your garden. So a good segue to talk about insects. And I'm going to jump on the bandwagon that the last two speakers did and give you this disclaimer of sorts. This is an incredibly deep topic. So just barely scratching the surface of things in the interest of time. And I'm going to press my foot on the accelerator so I can get through this so we can get to the important part of questions. So no diving in today's deep end of the pool, unfortunately, but that's a topic for future discussions. Just like when I saw that Bryce was going to talk about planting in 30 minutes. You did an admirable job. There's so much more and little nuances to talk about. So same. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being flexible with us. And let's go ahead and talk about some insects. So Deanna talked about aphids. That's probably the most common thing that you're going to see in the garden. Part of my title is the ugly. I think these guys are kind of pretty. They come in a wide range of colors. There's many, many different types of them, and they attack everything from trees and shrubs to vegetables. So they're very widespreading. They are a soft-bodied insect. They've got piercing, sucking mouth parts, so they suck saps out of your plants that causes them to stress. There's a wide range of hosts. They have very voracious appetites and usually show up to the party in mass. They are incredibly adaptable at repopulating themselves. But for the most part, they're more of an aesthetic pest. They may cause a little bit of damage. And you have to have a good threshold of tolerance to be in horticulture. That's horticulture rule number one is how much damage are you going to allow? How much infestation of these pests are you going to allow? And this ties into an integrated pest management plan, which I'll talk about a little bit later. One good thing about aphids is they are a food source for lots of different beneficial insects. So it's not a bad idea to keep them around because that way it'll attract beneficials to your garden. There are lots of chemical controls that you can use to control them. horticultural soaps and oils. But again, do you need to? Is there a threshold of tolerance for these sorts of things? An added benefit of aphids is this problem here. When aphids feed, they produce a product, actually a byproduct called honeydew, and that honeydew is high in sugars. It attracts this sooty mold, so that'll often occur on leaves and on your plants as well. And it's kind of gross and disgusting. Here's a close-up of aphids, and you can see the one on the left has that nice ball of honeydew it's kind of carrying around there, and that's the extract from the saps that they're eating. It comes out of these tailpipes at the back. That's the waste receptacle. I think they're called cornicles, and that's where the waste comes out. And always willing to fascinate. Mother Nature is an amazing thing. There are a lot of different types of ants that will actually farm aphids to get that honeydew. You can see in the picture on the right, it's a little bit fuzzy, but you can see that honeydew in the mouth of that ant, and they actually herd them like cattle. I've also noticed them doing that with crepe myrtle bark scale and other insects. So very, very interesting kind of factoid there. We aren't in the business of recommending treatments for things. There's lots of things out there. That's what the folks at our extension and the folks at Leaf and Limb do best in terms of offering good ways to control insects. Horticulture soaps are relatively safe to the user and to the plants that you're spraying these on. They're made from fatty acids, and they basically cover an insect's soft body and it burns them. A horrible way to go, but an effective way to treat soft-bodied insects. Most important part of anything that you're going to use in the garden, and a lot of people don't read the label. Everything you need to know about that product, the rates, the time of day, which is very important, how much that you should be using and when, all that stuff's on the label, not to be underestimated. I try to steer people away from home remedies. This is not the same as a horticultural soap. Horticultural soaps have been kind of vetted, so to speak, and trialed for years and years and years, and they're safe. You can do a lot of damage to yourself with home remedies, to your garden soil, and ultimately the plants as well. So use products that are labeled for this sort of thing. Another insect that was and one that you're going to see quite a bit south is our friend the Japanese beetle. This was brought into the United States from Asia many, many years ago. It is another voracious pest, but it does its damage through other venues. It is a chewer of things. It has chewing mouth parts, and it'll skeletonize leaves. This pest also has a broad host range. It eats lots and lots of things. It'll eat elm, it'll eat crepe myrtle, it loves your vegetables. If you are a grower of roses and a lot of different types of flowers, it even eats the petals of flowers. And this can be kind of a cyclical pest. In our hot, dry summer last year, this insect spends part of its lives as a larva in the soil. And because of the hot, dry nature of the summer we had, there was high mortality of this insect because of the dry conditions. Here in the lower picture is a picture of them in the soil as a larva. These grubs will grow and they feed on turfgrass roots. Here's another stab at our fascination with turfgrass. If you limit the amount of turfgrass you have, you eliminate this part of this insect's lifestyle and the ability to pupate in that environment. So that's another plus for getting rid of your turfgrass. You can buy pheromone traps, Japanese beetle traps, to help catch the Japanese beetles. It has a little card inside of the trap that has a pheromone. This attracts the beetles, thinking they're going into a romantic interlude, but they fly into the trap, they fall down into the basket in the bottom, and they can't fly back out, and it catches them. So if you think about that process and you have these in your yard, every Japanese beetle for acres is going to come to your garden and flock to these traps. So probably not the best method to control them. It's a good kind of weather vane to see if the insects are active. But if you go this route, put them in your neighbor's garden so that they go someplace else. They don't come to your garden. Something that I learned taking care of rose gardens. I've got a long history of rose gardens in my horticulture career. When I worked at the Biltmore Estate, we had a big rose garden there that I was in charge of and worked in. And we would have contests throughout the day to see how many Japanese beetles we could collect in buckets of soapy water. It takes kind of a mundane garden task and gives it a different spin. And that's one way to physically pick them off to get them under control. A little dip into caterpillars in the interest of time. Caterpillars can do a lot of damage in your garden. It's the larval stage of moths and butterflies and other things. This is an insect called orange striped oakworm. I'm seeing this more and more in our kind of our urban landscapes because it feeds on, you guessed it, oak trees. And this is another insect that in its life stage, they'll produce a lot of eggs. They'll hatch out into these larvae and they'll descend upon your oak trees in the early fall, late summer. And one way to know that they're, well, here's the female, actually kind of a pretty moth. And you can see the eggs being laid on the underside of a white oak leaf. And when you know that if you're not looking up into the trees, all you got to do is look down and you'll see this frass. Frass is a fancy term for caterpillar poop. And that's how you know that they're up in the trees feeding in mass and all this is dropping down. Again, this is kind of a more of a aesthetic pest. They may defoliate some leaves. One thing that's easy to do if you see them on a branch and a branch is in with reach is to prune that branch off and stomp them to death on the ground. It's satisfying and it's a quick way to get rid of a big colony. What these guys will do is as they feed on trees, they'll become terrestrial and they'll kind of move around to other oak trees and you'll rarely see them on the ground. But when you do, they've kind of depleted a food source and are moving and looking for something else to kind of nibble on. Another big group of insects that affects a wide range of things and that you're going to see in most landscapes are scale insects. Again, there are many types of scale insects. They are a sucking pest. They will anchor on a tree and have very long mouth parts, and they'll probe into the stem of a tree and start feeding on that sap. They can be soft-bodied or armored. There's often a protective coating on top of them, either a waxy coating or something that's kind of hard. They also are kind to us and have kind of a double whammy. They will produce sooty mold as well. As they're feeding, that excrement is very, very high in sugar. And again, that attracts the sooty mold, and that'll be down the stems, on the leaves, on anything underneath of a tree. You'll see that horrible sooty mold kind of developing. They're incredibly hard to control, and controlling them, timing is very, very important. When they are in that adult stage, it's harder to control them. When they hatch out, when the eggs hatch out, there's a small stage called a crawler, and that's the best time to catch those. And if you look at some extension websites and other things, there are growing degree days that determine when those insects are hatching out of the eggs and becoming crawlers. Those crawlers are moving all on the stems of plants, looking for new places to set up camp, and that's the best time to treat them. This, unfortunately, is something that, excuse me, may often require a heavier stick or a stronger control measure to kind of get them under control. Very difficult to control, as I mentioned. This is a common one that you see on red maples, particularly red maples that are planted in the wrong place, planted too deep, as Bryce mentioned, in stressful urban situations. That's a prime condition for these insects to attract a tree in that weakened state, and they'll be completely covered, those stems. And when it gets to this stage, it's something that's going to need a stronger form of control. But something as simple as the cultural things of keeping a tree healthy and happy will help eliminate some of those stressors. A relatively new one to our area. It's been around for a while, but it's gaining more attention because it's spreading very, very quickly. Crepe myrtle bark scale. Crepe myrtle is an important urban landscape plant. It's got great bark, it's got nice flowers, it's got nice fall color, but unfortunately, if you build it, they will come. There have been way too many of them planted in commercial landscapes, and this insect came in from Asia, kind of started in Texas and has rapidly moved its way east and is well established all throughout this part of North Carolina. You see on the right the cottony cover of the adult scales. They're anchored there and feeding actively. They also produce the honeydew, and that's what most people notice first. Is we'll get the question, what's this black stuff all over my tree? And that's the sooty mold from the honeydew. Another shot of a really good, healthy infestation all along the stems of a crepe myrtle. And these are some close-ups from our friends at UGA and Bugwood. Down at the bottom, you can see the adults, the white cover, and if you look closer, you see the little pink guys kind of running around. Those are the crawler stages, and that's the best stage to go after to help control this in your landscape. Horticulture oils are a good control for lots of things. They work very well on scales. It's relatively safe on plant material. It is made from an oil, mineral oil, and it covers the body of the insects, which keeps them from respiring. It basically suffocates them to death, and it's a good control for things like this. Relatively safe for the applicator and the plants. It's very sensitive to temperature. This isn't something you want to spray when it's warm. It also will affect some blue conifers and may change the color of them. Again, we're not in the business of recommending. And also read the label. It has all that information on there, but a relatively safe product to use. If you do good coverage, you can get good control. Another good coverage for the crepe myrtle bark scale that I failed to mention is physically removing them with heavy streams of water. That's been kind of effective, but if you miss a nook and cranny, they can kind of repopulate. And kind of a take-home message, and I mentioned this when I did my beneficial insect message. Any kind of chemical control, the beneficial insects take much longer to go through their life stage, and an insect like an aphid can reach sexual maturity in 4 to 10 days, where it'll take an insect like green lacewing, almost a month to 2 months to go from egg all through those stages to kind of reproduce itself. So something to think about when you're choosing your treatments. The beneficials never rebound and compete with a lot of our unfriendly insects that are affecting our garden. So one good approach, and I try to tuck this into any talk that I do about controlling insects and diseases in the garden, is developing an IPM plan. IPM is integrated pest management. It's a multi-pronged approach to keeping your garden healthy and happy, involving biological controls, cultural controls, and in some cases, chemical controls. But using some factor of those will help keep your garden in good stead. And just some basic cornerstones of that are growing and maintaining a diverse landscape, being in your garden and active and looking at some things, regularly scouting, walk around in the morning with your cup of coffee and kind of getting ahead of things, being proactive and not reactive. Developing a plan that fits your level of tolerance for insects and diseases in your garden. Know the good guys from the bad guys. Try to keep the good guys around. And again, be proactive, not reactive. Catching something earlier is better than when something kind of gets run away from. And get educated. Come to these sorts of things. Dive into the resources. I've been in public horticulture and horticulture for 30 years, and our North Carolina Cooperative Extension is one of the best ones that I've ever worked with in all the places that I've worked with. So we're very lucky to have them in our corner, and just a wealth of really good information out there. Always something to look forward to in the not too distant future. What's the next thing that's going to come through and affect our landscapes? Always being on the lookout for things. This is the spotted lanternfly. This is a really bad pest in the mid-Atlantic right now. and it has swept through relatively quickly. This is a current map from September 2024. And you can see in the mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, all up into New Jersey and New York State, it's becoming a really bad problem, and it's moving west very, very rapidly. Very, very hard to see our county down there, but there have been individual finds here in Wake County. There, and some of our other bigger urban areas, there's been individual finds down in Mecklenburg of Charlotte. No infestations yet, but we'd be foolish to think that we are not going to have to deal with this in the distant future. Something to keep your eye on. Broad range of hosts. The thing that it likes best is tree of heaven. And that's kind of a good indicator plant, and it's being used for that in different places. In the realm of the good, the bad, and the ugly, it's kind of a pretty insect. This is the adult stage, and that's the stage that feeds on trees. Again, piercing, sucking, creates our friend honeydew, and just throngs and throngs and thousands of these things attacking trees at one time. It's absolutely disgusting if you've ever seen it in person, and I've been lucky to see them just kind of quivering and moving up and down the branches. It's gotten the attention of USDA because it's affecting grape production in southeastern Pennsylvania and in other places where grapes are grown, New York State. Really, really bad pest on those. So it's gained a lot of attention. There's a good effort, at least today, in scouting and trying to stay ahead of this as a really bad pest and keeping it from spreading much, much further. These are the egg masses. They really blend into things very well. They also like to lay their eggs on metal, which is good for transporting them around. But again, on the right, you can see this birch tree that the ground is just black from the city mold. Absolutely disgusting. So rapid fire, wound down to the end here, and promoting some resources if you want to dig deeper on these topics and all things in that realm. Again, we are blessed to have a great cooperative extension service with really good resources that are easy to access. Please take advantage of that, and look for things that are troubling you in your garden, or just for good advice. There are lots of really good books out there. The Johnson and Lyons book on the right is what I had in college. One of my favorites, Garden Insects of North America, Whitney Cranshaw. They just produced a second edition of that, but a really, really good source with good pictures in it. And Eric Gristle has produced these two books. Insects and Gardens was his first, and Bees and Wasps just came out not too long ago, but really, really good books if you really want to scratch that itch and learn more about insects, both good and bad. Bees and Wasps are absolutely fascinating. That's a great book if you're remotely interested in that sort of thing. So sorry that you missed us in the garden. The best part of doing this is getting to see all your faces and talk to you about things and expressing this passion that we share. Please come visit us anytime. There's always something great to see, always something in flower. Just lots of things to come and see any time of the year. Thank you again to Leaf and Limb and all that you do to sponsor this and help us in the garden. Another great resource. I think Mark posted the link to their wonderful newsletter. But thank you for your help in the garden and beyond. And please come see us. If we've scratched any interest in things, or you have questions, there's my email address. And look forward to answering some of your questions today.